I use all my people in this space, my Kevs, my Lauren Marines, my Joe Williamses, my Steph Caminidis, Pat Lawsons, to bring understanding and acceptance to what I'm going through. Because every time I go to seek professional help and do the right thing, it's getting thrown back at me, and I'll tell them that I'm suicidal. They pick up the phone and want me to take it straight to a psych ward because they have no understanding of what the difference between feeling suicidal and taking that next step.
Some of my friends from an Italian background are like, you've got to eat it all. So
Yeah.
it's interesting that that's kind of the opposite.
Yeah. Definitely.
So if we can go back and break down. Hello, Maddie.
Hey mate.
How are you?
So a few years ago, I was doing research on men's depression specifically, and around that time, I was chatting with my co-founders at Spur Projects, and we realized that men's depression was a huge issue. There's still a lot of stigma, as there is with a lot of mental illness, but there's also that expectation that men won't talk, or they won't. When I told people I was researching men's depression, they said, nobody's going to talk to you, you're going to have such a hard time, and it's just going to be a complete flop.
Yeah.
But probably not a surprise to any of us that in fact people did have a lot to talk about. In some instances just said, I've never spoken to anyone else about this.
Wow.
And you're the first person. So I kind of realized, okay, there's some important work to be done here. And so since then, that was years ago, and Spur has grown quite a bit. Last year we ran How Is the World Feeling, which is kind of the latest project, which was in October, and we got people to use an app and tell us how they were feeling at various points throughout the day. And we had people from every continent in the world take part, including Antarctica.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I had tweeted the scientific basis and to say you take part, so I don't know if they got it. Anyway.
Yeah.
We were really happy with that, and I'm looking forward to getting stuck into that data next week because there's a lot of questions that we haven't been able to explore yet, and I'm looking forward to having a bit more spare time to do that. So the other side of what I'm doing now is I'm working in a research centre at the University of Canberra and ACT Health, and my whole position is basically to look at how we can encourage organisations to think critically about how they can engage consumers in leadership positions. So designing services, designing how to implement services, running them, getting involved on boards in a meaningful way. So we've seen that there's some organizations kind of get involved with consumers in a really tokenistic way, and they'll just say, yeah, we asked a consumer what they thought, and they tick a box, and it doesn't really mean anything. And often they don't even really listen to what the consumer says anyway. But policy says consumers are meant to be involved at every level of service planning, delivery, implementation, and evaluation. So I'm getting started now on a project looking at that. I've already had a couple of papers published, including one that just came out on Monday, so I'm very excited. Good timing. Which basically, that paper says that consumers bring a lot of value to mental health organisations. They know the mental health system in ways that no one else does. And that's from everything like tiny practical things that you wouldn't even think about to the really involved part of being a consumer. So no one else has that experience. They also have a lot of networks, or tend to, not everyone, but that's another part of value they can bring. And the other part of the value they can bring is that we found that when consumers are working in leadership roles of mental health services, they actually can use their lived experience to build trust really quickly and make connections in ways that no one else can. So the problem with that's all great stuff, but the problem is that a lot of organizations aren't recognizing that value. Some of them are sort of using consumers in a tokenistic sense still, and I'm really curious to see how we can get organizations to realize that value, because there are some success stories there as well. There's a few. And so over the next few months, I want to go out and talk to people about, well, what has worked,
Yes.
what is that element of, you know, these organizations that are engaging with consumers in real meaningful ways, and how can we make that happen in a widespread kind of manner?
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to those conversations.
That's fantastic and so needed.
Yeah.
And it almost seems like a no-brainer. Like, why wouldn't you do this?
Yeah.
So it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So we just need people to listen.
Sometimes that is the slightly frustrating thing, is that I feel like, well, wouldn't this have been done from day one?
Yeah.
But there's still such a culture change that I think needs to happen. There's a lot of pushback. A lot of people coming from that traditional medical model think that, you know, like the psychiatrist knows best, or the medical director or whoever knows best, and are still not valuing that other kind of knowledge. So
Yeah.
it's a challenge, but
It'll be worthwhile.
yeah. And I think things are slowly changing.
Yes.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are.
I've noticed, I think when I was at my peak of my illness, in my suicide attempt, if I had that model,
Yeah.
things would have been a lot different and probably a lot easier. And I would trust more, because I know even when I was in the psych ward and I was feeling really suicidal, there's no way I was going to go to a nurse, because I didn't want to get like transported to another section or locked up even more strict. So I didn't say anything, which is unhelpful, because I'm in the best place to get help, but I wouldn't reach out for it because I was scared. So I think if I had the lived experience person, I would definitely do that.
It's the
Yeah.
same for me. Like, I'm only recently, last 2 months, going through re-diagnosis of what I experienced, and I use all my people in this space, my Kevs, my Lauren Breens, my Joe Wounses, my Steph Caminidis, Pat Lawsons, to bring understanding and acceptance to what I'm going through. Because every time I go to seek professional help and do the right thing, it's getting thrown back at me, and I'll tell them that I'm suicidal. And they pick up the phone and want me to take it straight to a psych ward, because they have no understanding of what the difference between feeling suicidal and taking that next step.
Yeah. Right.
It's exactly what you're saying. It's needed. It's required.
Yeah.
There's I can't go and seek professional help because I know where I'll end up. Well, I can't tell them the truth. Therefore, I'm going around in circles.
Yeah.
So people with lived experiences bring me more understanding and education to what I'm going through
Yeah.
than I've found in professional help.
Isn't that? I mean, again, it's that kind of thing of, shouldn't this just be
A no-brainer.
common sense?
Yeah.
That in this
Yeah. And just in so obviously at the individual level, I think it makes a big difference, and I think they could also make a big difference at that systemic kind of level
Yeah.
as well. So filtering down to
But in turn, if there's a role for people with a lived experience to come into the sector, there's work for them to help other people. It's mindful, and doing what I do keeps me well. Has saved my life. So in turn, for these people that live with a chronic illness, they're in turn giving themselves something to stay occupied, some purpose. And there's room for as many as we can get a hold of in lived experiences. And like Kev says, the more the merrier. If someone's got a story to tell, let's get it out there, because we know that stories bring hope. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
needed.
And it was interesting because at the early of the week, David Covington said something really cool, which really resonated with me. Was in literature, media stories and things, the reason why people don't want to talk about suicide, and there's the myth that it's contagious almost, is because we only hear of when someone has suicide and we've lost them. And then if you've had a suicide attempt and survived, you're almost diminished, and like it wasn't you're okay now, it's fine, you lived. Whereas that is what we need to be talking about, so that we can show people that you can live, there is hope, and we can get through it together. And I think that the research you're doing too, it sort of agrees with that notion. So
Using the people that have had suicide attempts and are still here and still productive and still living in a happy and enjoyable life, the more we talk about the people that have suicided, it can have the reverse effect on people, where they feel that it's acceptable to do that because he has. So there's a fine line between the two, but more stories of success
yes,
are important.
yeah. How can we get more stories of success out there?
well, we have people like Kevin Hines doing the amazing work that he's doing, that give us advocates, I know for us within the Australian sector, the opportunity and that platform to share our stories in a large scale and do epic things with it.
The confidence to tell your story.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of people that want to tell their story, but every time they do, they get frowned upon. So it's people like Kev, and there's a lot of great people in the sector that they give you the confidence to step up on stage, tell your story, get in front of cameras, tell your story, because every story, it's not a competition whose story is better than the others. Every story will serve a purpose on someone out there.